You guys here at Late Night, we don't always have enough time to cover all of the recent news. So here with a recap is one of our writers, Amber Ruffin, in a segment we call Amber Says What.
You guys, things have been crazy. Okay, so the Michael Jackson biopic came out and it got bad reviews. And I was like, what? I'm still gonna see it. Then it made a butt ton of money and I was like, what? I'm definitely gonna see it. But then Janet Jackson was like, I don't like that they made that movie. And I was like, what? Nah, look, I do whatever Janet Jackson tells me to. She says jump, and I say, please don't make me jump. My knee's been bad since I learned the choreography to Rhythm Nation. Then my friend told me that Manosphere influencer, Clavicular, who's all about looks maxing, recently got frame mugged. And I was like, what are the symptoms of a stroke? Because I'm pretty sure you're having one. My friend then took the time to explain to me what all that means. So,
morally, we here at Late Night with Seth Meyers would feel terrible if we were the reason you learned the meaning of nonsense words like looks maxing and frame mogged. So we're blocking this part out. You're welcome and enjoy your day.
And that's why he had his YouTube channels taken away. Then King Charles came to the United States and I was like, what? Why? Why would you come to America now? Haven't you heard what we do to people who come here from other countries? They'll never put me in a detention center. I'm king. You think they won't treat you like an immigrant? They already separated you from one of your children. We're not giving him back. Then I heard that it was the 10th anniversary of Beyonce's Lemonade album, and I was like, what? I was like, what? It hasn't been 10 years.
Amber, I'm afraid it has.
I've been listening to the same album for 10 years?
You have.
Wow. Time really flies when you look the same.
You can't crack it.
Come on, baby. Then I saw a picture of Tracy Ellis Ross in Vogue, and I was like, what? You look so cute. Then I read the caption described her hair as a cloud bob, and I was like, what the is a cloud bob? Do you mean afro? Now, look, I don't have time to explain the implications of looking at an afro and choosing to make up a whiter name for it, so I'll just say it with a look. Then I read that a woman at Trader Joe's claimed she found a human finger in her orange juice, and I was like, what? A human finger? Thank goodness. Because that explains why that juice is $25. I thought Trader Joe's was charging extra money for no reason, but it's people. The juice is people. So then, Megan Thee Stallion accused Klay Thompson of cheating on her, and I was like, what? Then she fought back tears during her Broadway performance that same night, and I was like, what? Then I read that her fans immediately started hiring witches on Etsy to curse him for cheating on her. And I was like, what? Now, as soon as I heard that, I hired an Etsy witch to give Seth a cloud bob.
Joke's on you. I like it.
Ooh, now that is a cloud bob. Then I read that a tech company made an AI model of Jesus Christ that you can talk to, and I was like, what? Then I read it charges $1.99 a minute to talk to him, and I was like, what? Is this a phone sex hotline or a Jesus hotline? Then I looked at the picture of Jesus, and that might be both. Sexy little savior. Then that there was a new rom-com out called All Is Fair in Love and Mahjong. And I was like, what? A rom-com that's not about a small blonde woman? Sign me up. Then I saw the poster and was like, what? What do you want to bet? They were like, it's called Love and Mahjong, and everyone's Asian, and they were like, great. Then Trump got reelected, and they were like, actually. Then they changed everything, because that's what happened to me when I pitched my movie, All Is Fair in Love and Spades. Then I I saw that the Miss Grand Thailand pageant had a viral moment, and I was like, what could it possibly be? Was the woman too beautiful? Was she perhaps too elegant? But then I saw it. What is she competing in? She killed that. People love her, and I see why. She said, to hell with societal norms. I'm gonna do my best impression of Ray Gun from the 2024 Olympics. Then, the biggest news of the week happened. Okay, so there's a Bravo show called Summer House, and they had the biggest scandal of all time. And I was like, what? So let me explain it to you.
I'm back to save you more brain space, baby. You're welcome and enjoy your day.
So if you ask me, that bitch had it coming. This has been Amber Says What?